The wind howled like a pack of wolves over the wide Montana plains, hurling snow against Claire Harrow's cabin until the shutters rattled in protest. It was the kind of storm that could kill a man twice, first by cold, then by the silence it left behind. Claire stepped out into it anyway. Wrapped in her father's old cavalry coat, rifle slung across her back, she trudged through thigh-deep snow toward the distant fence line. Something wasn't right. She'd heard a noise, low, dull, like dead weight hitting hard earth. Not the kind of sound a branch makes. Number something heavier. That's when she saw him, a shape slumped in the snow, just beside the southern post of her barbed wire fence. Claire knelt cautiously, one hand resting on the cold iron of her rifle. The man wasn't moving, face half buried in the snow, lips blue and frosted over. But when she touched his neck, a pulse, faint, fragile. But there. Damn fool, she muttered, brushing ice from his face. You picked a hell of a night to die. She saw the blood next, the dark smear crusted along his temple, half frozen in the cold. And then something glinting beneath his coat, a broken badge. Pinkerton, half of one anyway. The rest was missing, snapped clean down the middle. Whoever this man was, he hadn't come by accident. Claire wasn't the kind of woman who believed in fate, but she did believe in debt, and this stranger, whoever he was now in hers. With effort, she hauled him over her shoulder and dragged him toward the cabin, each step a battle against snow and wind. Inside, the fire crackled low in the iron stove, throwing shadows across the log walls. Claire kicked the door shut, dropped the stranger by the hearth, and knelt beside him. Don't die on me, she warned, tearing off his gloves and scarf. His skin was raw from frostbite, his hands stiff, but his eyes fluttered. Alive. Barely. She worked quickly, stripped off his outer layers, wrapped him in wool blankets, and rubbed whiskey across the gash on his head. He flinched at the sting, but didn't wake. His lips parted once, a breath escaping. Wade, he whispered. That was all. She sat back on her heels, watching him. In the firelight, he looked even more ragged, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, hadn't eaten in longer. No weapons on him, just the broken badge, and a name she wasn't sure was real. Claire stayed up all night beside the stove, feeding logs into the fire, watching the stranger's chest rise and fall. She didn't sleep. She hadn't slept well in years. Not since the war. Not since her husband was laid in the ground under a wooden marker that simply read, Captain Harrow, CSA. Not since her son, barely 12, had died of fever the winter after. Grief changes a person. Claire knew this well. It makes you careful, makes you quiet, and it teaches you to listen. By dawn, the storm had slowed to a whisper. The land outside was a white canvas. No birds, no sound, just cold. Inside, the stranger stirred. His eyelids twitched, lips dry. Claire handed him a cup of water and raised it to his mouth. He drank, barely, then rasped. Where am I? My land, she said. My rules. His eyes scanned the room slowly, then settled on her. You saved me, she shrugged. You weren't dead yet. His lips curled just slightly. Could have fooled me. Claire studied him in the light. Dark hair matted to his skull, stubble along his jaw, deep lines around his eyes. He looked older than she first thought. Maybe 35, maybe more. You said your name was Wade, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. No last name. A pause. Not one that matters anymore. Claire didn't push. Not yet. Rest, she said. We'll talk when you stop looking like death on two legs. She stood and moved toward the stove. Outside, the world was still buried, but something told her this stranger didn't come from the cold. He came from something worse, and now he was hers to deal with. By the second day, Wade could sit up on his own. Claire stood by the stove, slicing dried venison with a weathered knife while Wade sipped broth from a chipped mug. His movements were slow, but steady now. The color had started returning to his face, though the bruises remained like shadows that refused to fade. You're not from around here, Claire said without turning. It wasn't a question. No, he said simply. They left it at that. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, but the world remained wrapped in winter's quiet grip. The wind had calmed. A stillness hung in the air. Not peace, just the waiting kind, like something was about to crack. Claire leaned the knife against the cutting board and wiped her hands on her apron. "You gonna tell me what you were doing out here, Wade? Or do I have to keep guessing?" He looked up from the mug, eyes sharp despite his wounds. "Looking for someone. Pinkerton business?" His brow twitched. "Used to be." She crossed her arms. "That half badge says otherwise." Wade nodded slowly. "Let's just say I asked the wrong questions. Didn't like the answers I found." Claire tilted her head. "And they sent you out into a blizzard to die?" "Not exactly." He set the mug down. "I left on my own. They just stopped coming after me." Claire didn't believe that for a second. That night the knock came. Sharp. Deliberate. Claire opened the door to find Reverend Thomas Bell and Abigail Fletcher, her former sister-in-law, standing in the snow like carved statues. Reverend Bell clutched a worn Bible. Abigail a tighter clutch of judgment. "Claire," Abigail said, voice as cold as the wind, "we heard you've taken in a man." "I took in a dying man," Claire replied flatly. "Not that it's your concern." "It is when a woman of your standing brings shame on the Lord's house," Reverend Bell added, stepping forward. "Unmarried, alone, sharing a home with—" "Enough." Claire's voice cut through the cold like steel. "I buried my husband and my son. You think I care what people whisper over pie and prayer?" Abigail flinched but stood her ground. "Sin has a way of growing roots, Claire. We came to warn you." Claire's lips curled into something not quite a smile. "Good. Now you can leave knowing you did your duty." She shut the door before they could reply. Wade was standing now, leaning against the wall. "You okay?" She didn't answer, just stared at the door, breathing steady. "I know that kind of talk," he said softly. "People pretending they're saving you while they're just digging a hole to drop you in." She looked at him then, really looked. He didn't carry a gun, but there was something about the way he held himself, the way his eyes scanned the room like he'd measured every threat. "You're not just some ex-agent," she said. "You've seen things." He nodded. "And I've got the scars to prove it." Wade leaned forward slightly. "There's a judge in town named of Harold Meeker. Behind closed doors, he's been buying up deeds that ain't his, forging papers, forcing old war widows off their land." Claire's eyes narrowed. "My land?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "You came here because you thought I was next." "I came because I thought someone might listen." She turned back to the fire. "Then you're a damn fool." "Maybe," Wade said, "but I don't regret it." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't feel so heavy anymore. Outside, snow started to fall again, slow and soft like ash. But something had shifted in the air. He hadn't come to protect her. He'd come for justice. And now Claire wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. They buried him at sunrise. Not Wade, at least not the real Wade. The man laid to rest in the pine coffin, lowered into frozen earth behind Claire's barn, was an idea, a fabrication, a necessary ghost. Claire had carved the name Unknown Traveler into the small wooden cross. She said a few words, not for the crowd, there wasn't one, but for the wind, and maybe for Wade himself, who stood a few yards away beneath a wool coat too big for his frame. The morning frost glittered like glass over the field. The preacher hadn't come. Claire hadn't asked. "Reckon it's not the worst burial I've had," Wade murmured, watching the dirt fall in soft thuds. "Let's hope it's the last," Claire replied, pulling her scarf tighter. From that moment forward, Wade Dillon was officially dead. That should have offered some safety. No name, no badge, no more pursuers. But in a town like Billings Gap, death didn't mean you were forgotten. It meant someone else got to rewrite your story. The day after the funeral, Claire rode into town for supplies. The general store went quiet the second she stepped in. Eyes shifted, tongue stopped. She didn't flinch. Behind the counter, Mr. Greeley's hands fumbled the salt sack. "Morning, Mrs. Harrow." "Afternoon," she said, dropping coins on the worn oak. "Don't suppose you've seen a ghost today?" He blinked. "Beg pardon?" "You know, tall fella, scar over his left eye, federal badge once pinned to his coat." Greeley swallowed hard. "No, ma'am." She took her change and left without another word. By the time she returned home, Wade had mended 2 fence posts and split a day's worth of kindling. His strength was returning, and so was his clarity. "They'll come sniffing," he said that night over a quiet supper. "They already are," Claire replied. Wade looked toward the window, as if he could see the town from there. "I should move on." "No." Claire's voice was flat, final. "You're not leaving." Wade raised an eyebrow. "That right?" "You brought a storm to my doorway, Dylan," she said. "I buried the body. I'm not about to unearth it just so you can bleed alone somewhere else." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. That night he didn't sleep much. Neither did she. 2 days later, the pressure came. 3 men arrived just after noon in a polished black wagon, the kind used more for intimidation than travel. One was a lawyer. One was a banker. The last was Judge Meeker himself. They stood at her fence like they owned it, hats in hand and lies ready. "Mrs. Harrow," Meeker said with a smile that never reached his eyes, "we've heard you're struggling with the upkeep of your property." Claire folded her arms. "I'm not." "Times are hard," the banker added. "A generous buyout could ease the burden." "I'm not selling." They kept smiling, but their eyes sharpened. "There are whispers," Meeker said softly, "about a man on your land. A stranger, a criminal even." Claire stepped forward, boots crunching the frostbitten dirt. "You want to make this legal?" she said. "Bring a warrant. Otherwise, get the hell off my property." The banker lost his smile first. The lawyer followed. Meeker tipped his hat with a sneer. "We'll be in touch." They rode off in silence, leaving tracks in the snow. That evening, Wade handed Claire a worn leather satchel. Inside were folded papers, old, yellowed, but official. Federal records, deeds, maps, letters. "These," he said, "prove everything." Claire's eyes scanned the pages. "This is enough to burn the whole town to the ground." He nodded. "Which is why they'll come harder next time." She folded the documents carefully. "Then we make sure they regret it." No love had been spoken between them. No kiss exchanged. Just the quiet understanding of 2 people who'd buried too much and still stood. The world would try to dig them under again, but this time, they'd be ready. The knock didn't come in the dead of night. It came at noon. Claire was peeling potatoes by the window when she saw them. 6 men on horseback, riding slow and wide across the field. No sheriff's stars, no court orders, just rifles across their saddles and hatred in their eyes. "They didn't even wait for darkness," she muttered, tossing the blade into the sink. Wade was already at the door, rifle in hand. "They want to make a show of it. They picked the wrong curtain." The men dismounted at the fence line like they owned the dirt under their boots. The one in front, a broad man in a tan duster and a crooked mustache, called out in a voice oily with arrogance, "Afternoon, Miss Harrow. We're just here to have a conversation." "Don't need 6 rifles for a conversation," Claire called back, stepping onto the porch with her own rifle resting easy in her hands. Wade stayed in the shadow of the doorway, invisible but ready. "Word is you're harboring a ghost," the man said. "One who owes some powerful folks answers." Claire didn't blink. "This land's private. Your words die at the fence." That made the man laugh, a big ugly sound that didn't touch his eyes. "Ma'am, we're deputized by community authority. No badge, no judge, no entry." The man shifted in his boots, the false smile sliding off. "We were hoping to do this polite." "You knocked with bullets," Wade said from the doorway, stepping out just enough to be seen. Recognition flickered across the man's face. "Well now, look what crawled out of his own grave." They reached for their weapons. Claire fired first. The shot cracked across the open yard, sending one of the men reeling from his saddle, blood blooming across his shoulder. Wade fired a breath later, dropping another who tried to flank through the side path. The others dove for cover, shots ringing out and splintering the porch railing. Claire ducked low and reloaded, calm and sharp. Her land had been prepped. Barbed wire in the tall grass, glass shards buried in the dirt. One of the attackers screamed as he tripped into a hidden pit, his ankle twisting with a crunch. Wade moved like a ghost between windows, picking shots with careful precision. They'd both trained for this, not with drills, but with survival. With knowing that sometimes you didn't wait for justice, you defended it. 10 minutes later, it was over. 3 men lay in the snow groaning. 2 had retreated on horseback. The sixth, the one in the tan duster, had bled out behind the barn, a look of shock frozen on his face. Claire stood over him, boots planted, rifle still warm. Wade came to her side, breathing heavy. "You hurt?" She shook her head. "You clipped my side, that's all." They stared down at the man who'd tried to take everything from them. "Is it over?" Wade asked. Claire didn't answer. She looked out past the hills where smoke from the town rose lazy and indifferent. "No," she said softly. "This was just a warning." Wade nodded. "We sent one back." Claire looked at him. "We ride into town?" she asked. "No," he said. "We let them come. We make it clear. This land is defended." That night they burned the bodies. No names, no prayers, just fire and silence. Claire sat by the stove after, her face lit by orange glow, while Wade stitched his wound with quiet grit. No words of comfort, just presence. Just breathe. He poured them both a shot of whiskey. She didn't toast. Didn't need to. They drank to survival, to the silence they'd earned. Tomorrow the wind would bring more trouble, but tonight they held the line. By dawn the cabin was quiet again, but Wade couldn't sleep. He sat at the table, a stack of leather-bound ledgers and brittle parchment spread before him. His coat was off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing the faded scars of old battles and the fresh welt of yesterday's bullet. The flicker of lantern light played across his face as he sorted through the documents one by one, his brow furrowed with focus. Claire entered quietly, mug in hand. "That the storm we're bracing for?" Wade looked up, eyes tired but burning with purpose. He tapped the papers gently. "This is why they want me dead." He spread them across the table. Surveyors' maps, forged deeds, notarized lies. At the center of it all, a name scrawled in sharp, heavy ink. Judge Cyrus Holt. Claire narrowed her eyes. The judge? Owned half the town before the war. Bought the rest with land stolen from widows, dead veterans, and freedmen. My unit uncovered it. I went digging deeper. Too deep. You have enough proof? Wade held up a thick envelope, sealed with wax cracked by time. Every signature, every bribe, names, dates, even letters between Holt and the territorial governor. Claire sat down across from him. "Then we bury them with it." Wade raised an eyebrow. "You want to release this?" "I want it read, out loud, where the whispers can't twist it." He leaned back, fingers lacing together behind his head. "You know what that means. They'll come harder next time." He nodded slowly. "Harder and legal." Claire picked up the envelope, weighing it in her hand like a revolver. "We'll go to church." He blinked. "You?" "I've avoided that building for 15 years, but if they want righteousness, I'll give them judgment." That Sunday, Claire and Wade rode into town together. She wore her mother's shawl, the one she hadn't touched since her husband died. Wade wore a borrowed coat, collar turned up to hide the scar just above his jaw. The townsfolk fell quiet as they passed. Gas fluttered like wind across dry wheat. Children were yanked off porches. Curtains twitched. Inside the chapel, Reverend Coyle was halfway through a sermon on the virtue of submission when Claire stood up in the back, her voice steady. "Reverend," she said, "I have a confession to read." He blinked. "This is a house of God." "And God," she said, stepping forward, "deserves the truth." She handed the sealed envelope to Wade. He opened it. His voice, though soft, echoed across the pews like thunder. He read every line, the forgeries, the stolen acres, the names of men in that very chapel who profited while others starved. Claire watched them shift in their seats, Judge Holt paling like snow under sun, Reverend Coyle going stiff as a tombstone. By the end, silence filled the room like smoke after a fire. Claire turned to the crowd. "You want to call me a sinner," she said, "but the rot didn't start at my gate. It started right here." She walked out. Wade followed. No one stopped them. Back at the cabin, they didn't talk much. Just chopped wood, patched bullet holes, boiled beans. But when night fell, Claire placed her rifle beside the door like she always did. Then she turned to Wade and asked, Would you have still come here if you'd had a choice? He met her gaze. I didn't, but I'm glad I did. She nodded once, slow and tired. Then we stay ready. Outside, the wind changed direction. By the time the sun rose over the distant ridge, Wade had already spotted them. Not townsfolk this time. Not lawmen either. 3 riders at first, lean, quiet, too sure in the saddle, then more behind them. A dozen, maybe more. Faces hidden under dust masks, rifles slung like extensions of their arms. Claire joined him at the window. Her breath fogged the glass. They're not here to scare us, she said quietly. No, Wade agreed. They're here to finish what the town couldn't. He limped to the trunk at the end of the bed and pulled out a wrapped bundle. Inside, a long rifle, oiled and waiting. Claire fetched the satchels of shells from under the floorboards. Neither spoke. There was no need. They knew this day would come. By noon, the sun hung overhead like an executioner's lantern. The mercenaries stopped just beyond the tree line. Their leader, a broad man with a beard like barbed wire, raised a hand. We want Wade Mercer, he called. Give him up, and we'll spare the widow. Claire stepped onto the porch. Her coat flapped in the wind. Funny, she said, voice hard as rawhide. I didn't ask what you wanted. The bearded man chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You got 10 minutes. Take 5, Claire shot back, and pray your boots can outrun bullets. They retreated into the cabin and took their places. Claire on the rooftop again. Wade crouched behind the wagon, rifle braced, pain pulsing in his wounded leg. The air felt tight, brittle. Then, gunfire. It roared through the valley like a breaking dam. Claire's first shot dropped a rider clean off his horse. Wade's second punched through a mercenary's chest, sending him tumbling like a sack of wheat. The cabin shook as bullets tore into it. Planks split, windows shattered. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Still, they fired back, calm and deadly. One mercenary made it to the porch. Claire shot him point blank, the recoil kicking her shoulder back like a mule. Wade dragged another down with a shot between the eyes just before the man lit the fuse to a stick of dynamite. Then came the worst of it. A blast rocked the side wall. Claire tumbled from the roof, hitting the snow with a grunt. Blood seeped from her temple. Wade crawled to her, dragging her behind the trough, breath ragged. Stay with me, he whispered, pressing his hand to the wound. Claire, stay! Her eyes fluttered. Not done yet. Together they pushed back, one bullet at a time, one breath at a time. When the dust settled, 5 bodies lay across the field. The rest? They'd fled, scared not just of death, but of something worse. People who didn't bend. Claire sat propped against a barrel, her hair matted with blood, but her eyes sharp. Wade knelt beside her, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. You said you didn't need protecting, he murmured. She smirked through the pain. I don't. You saved me anyway. I guess that makes us even. He helped her inside, stitched her wound with shaking fingers, then collapsed beside her by the fire. They didn't speak for hours, just listened to the wind. Now soft again, curling through the broken eaves. Days passed. They rebuilt. Again. Hammered planks, salted meat. Dug deeper trenches. And one morning, Wade buried the Pinkerton badge behind the barn. No ceremony, just a stone on the dirt, unmarked. That life was over. Inside, Claire watched from the window. When he returned, she poured 2 cups of coffee and said, You think they'll ever stop coming? Wade shook his head. No. Still worth it? He looked around. The battered walls, the new beams, the woman who never flinched. Every damn minute. That night, they sat on the porch, side by side. No words, no fear. Just the stars above and the sound of a world that had finally mercifully quieted. The wind had changed direction, and this time, it was blowing in their favor. And so, across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, Because out here, there are still so many truths left to tell, each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.